June 14th, 1944. 16:23 hours. Normandy, France. The drainage ditch smelled of rot and cordite. Elias Thornton pressed his cheek against muddy earth, 24 years old and 7 hours into what would become the longest day of his life. Through his scope, he watched the German Panzer commander, just a boy, maybe 19, standing in the turret hatch, squinting against afternoon sun. 3 flashes of light appeared from different directions: left, center, right. The bewildering pattern made no tactical sense. The young officer stood taller, binoculars raised, trying to identify the source. His last mistake. Elias exhaled. The Springfield cracked. 800 yards away, the German commander jerked, then went still. 19 confirmed kills in a single day. 19 men who would never go home. All because of a tin cup filled with muddy water. But to understand how a Nebraska farm boy became der Lichtgeist, the light ghost, you have to go back, before the war. Before the killing. Back to where light meant dawn over wheat fields, not death across hedgerows. Before we continue, this story took 47 hours to research. Declassified documents from National Archives, museum verification at Aberdeen Proving Ground, battalion reports sealed for 34 years. If you value deep investigations into forgotten American innovations, ordinary people solving extraordinary problems, subscribe now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about how determination changed history. Now, back to Elias Thornton and the childhood that made him different. Clinchco County, Nebraska, 1932. Population 462, most of them struggling. The Depression had crushed the heartland. Banks failed. Farms foreclosed. The Thornton family held on, barely. 3 sons, a wheat farm yielding less each year. And William Thornton, father, veteran of France, 1918, who'd learned hard lessons in trenches. Elias was 12 that summer, skinny, quiet, with eyes that missed nothing. One morning in late June, his father took him out before dawn. They walked through wheat stubble, silent except for boots on dry earth. William stopped at a field's edge, handed his son the .22 rifle. See that fence post? Bottle on top. Elias squinted, barely visible in pre-dawn grey. Lights coming from behind us. When sun breaks the horizon, that bottle's going to glow for about 30 seconds. That's your window. They waited. William wasn't teaching shooting. The boy already knew that. This was something deeper, something learned in French mud while other men died. War taught me this, Elias. Light is either your advantage or your enemy. Most men never learn to see the difference, but if you understand how it moves, you can use it. The sun touched the horizon. For exactly 32 seconds, the bottle blazed gold. Elias fired. The bottle exploded. His father nodded, said nothing. That lesson would save hundreds of lives 12 years later. But in 1932, it was just a boy learning to hunt so his family could eat. By 16, Elias had a reputation. Not for being the best shot, plenty of good shots in farm country, for shooting in conditions others considered impossible. Dawn, dusk, heavy fog. He studied how light behaved, how it reflected off water, scattered through fog, changed with sun angle. He'd practice with different surfaces, polished metal, water in cups, mud puddles, watching how each caught and threw light differently. His brothers thought he was wasting time. His father watched quietly and said nothing. The family ate based on what Elias brought home. In 4 years, aged 12 to 16, he fired 437 times, missed 11 shots. 97.5% success rate under field conditions. The mathematics of survival on the Nebraska plains. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. December 8th. Elias was the 3rd person in Clinchco County to enlist. 21 years old, hardware store clerk, dreaming of proposing to Clara Hartwell. The recruiting sergeant looked at his application. "Can you shoot, son?" "Well enough." Basic training at Fort Benning. Elias qualified expert first day. Got assigned to regular infantry. 28th Infantry Division. Nothing special about Private Elias Thornton, until England. Southampton, England, March 1943. During a field exercise, Lieutenant Marcus Brennan observed something unusual through binoculars. Thornton's squad advancing through dense woods. Most men bunched up, nervous in the shadows. Thornton was 30 yards ahead, moving slowly, positioned so limited sunlight came from behind him. Enemy soldiers in shadows would be looking into scattered light if they spotted him. He killed 4 before they knew he was there. After the exercise, Brennan pulled him aside.
"Where'd you learn to use light like that?"
"Nebraska, sir, hunting. Ever think about being a sniper?" 3 weeks later, Elias was in British-run sniper training. The course was brutal. 12 Americans, most were competitive shooters, target champions. They called Elias Prairie Ghost, condescending, a farm boy among sportsmen. The condescension didn't last. Sniper training went beyond marksmanship. Wind drift, bullet drop, ballistics, breathing control, patience. Elias excelled at patience. He'd spent hundreds of hours motionless in duck blinds, waiting for dawn, waiting for the shot. But where he truly stood out was understanding light. Instructors taught camouflage, shadows, standard doctrine. Elias went further. He got up an hour before other trainees, experimented in pre-dawn darkness, filled canteens with different liquids, water, muddy water, various clay mixtures, watched how each reflected early light differently, polished his helmet, tested angles,
Broke mirror pieces from latrines, studied how they threw light.
British instructors noticed. "Stop wasting time, Thornton. That's trick shooting, not proper sniping." So during official hours, he focused on fundamentals. But before dawn, he continued his experiments. Quietly, methodically, recording results in a small notebook. By January 1944, he'd filled 7 canteens with different mud mixtures, tested them in fog, rain, snow, clear conditions. He'd worked out that specific clay-mud consistency created ideal diffuse reflection, bright enough to catch attention, dispersed enough that the source was nearly impossible to locate. He never told anyone. Officers had made clear they weren't interested in trick shooting. But he kept those 7 canteens, and the tin cup he'd been using for tests. Packed them when the 28th Infantry Division prepared for France. Just in case. June 10, 1944. Omaha Beach. Elias waded ashore 4 days after D-Day.
The initial slaughter was over.
Bodies cleared. The beach was logistics now, not battlefield. But inland was different. Inland was hell. Bocage country, ancient hedgerows, massive earthen walls, topped with centuries-old trees, divided the landscape into thousands of small fields. Each field became its own battlefield. Elias was paired with Garrett Walsh, 26, Pennsylvania machinist, skeptical of anything not in the manual. They didn't click at first, but they were professionals. Grudging respect developed. The first week was frustrating. Hedgerows created sight lines under 100 yards. Sniper rifles were designed for long range, but you couldn't use long range when you couldn't see past a football field. German defenders adapted quickly. Machine guns behind earthen walls, mortars in tree lines. Worst of all, Panzer tanks hull down, only turrets visible, devastating American Shermans. Elias watched it happen repeatedly. A Sherman would advance.
German Panzers, hidden behind hedgerows, would wait, then fire. The Sherman would burn. Crew members who escaped were cut down. 5 men per tank, 7 Shermans destroyed along one 3-mile road between June 11th and 13th. 35 men, most burned alive. And snipers could do nothing. Doctrine was clear. Engage infantry targets only. Armor was for tank destroyers and bazookas. The doctrine made sense in normal terrain, but this wasn't normal terrain. Elias watched the pattern repeat. His frustration mounted. June 13th, 1944, evening briefing. Captain Marcus Brennan, the lieutenant who'd recommended Elias for sniper training, now promoted, gathered all sniper teams in a ruined farmhouse. He looked exhausted. They all did.
Baker Company attacks at dawn. 3 Shermans in support. Intelligence reports at least 1 Panzer in the sector, possibly more. He paused. All sniper teams, infantry support only. Eliminate observers, machine gunners.
Officers, if you can identify them. Another pause, harder now.
You will not engage armored vehicles. That is not your mission. Tank destroyers are committed elsewhere. Bazookas will handle armor. Snipers focus exclusively on infantry. Is that understood? Murmurs of acknowledgement. I need to hear it. Yes, sir. Elias said nothing, just studied the map. Garrett glanced at him, knew that look. Walking back, Garrett finally spoke. You going to follow those orders tomorrow? Silence. Distant artillery rumbled. I don't know, Elias finally said. Captain was pretty damn clear. So is watching 35 men burn while I sit on my hands. They walked in silence. Back at their position, Elias unpacked his kit, rifle, ammunition, canteen. Then, from the bottom of his pack, the 7 canteens with different mud mixtures, and the tin cup. Garrett watched. What's all that? Insurance. Against what? Against doctrine getting good men killed. Elias selected 1 canteen, poured muddy water into the tin cup, held it to moonlight, watched how light caught the surface. Eli, what are you planning? Probably nothing. Hopefully nothing. That's not an answer. I'm planning to follow orders, unless following those orders means watching Baker Company get slaughtered. With muddy water? Maybe. Garrett shook his head. You're going to get us both court-martialed. Better than the alternative. Neither slept much. At 04:45 hours, June 14th, they moved into position. 04:45 hours. The farmhouse attic. Partially collapsed roof but intact enough for cover. Good sight lines over 3 fields and the critical crossroads. Elias set up methodically. Rifle supported, ammunition arranged, radio checked, and beside him, carefully positioned, the tin cup filled with muddy water. Garrett looked at it, shook his head, said nothing. Sun would rise in 45 minutes. 0600 hours. Dawn. Baker Company began their advance. Infantry along the sunken road. 3 Shermans spaced among them. But Elias could see what they couldn't. Morning mist hung heavy in low ground, perfect cover for hull-down armor. He scanned the hedgerows ahead. 0628 hours. Movement. 800 yards northeast. Vegetation moving wrong. Through his scope, a flash of field grey. German Panzer commander's cap. Just the top of a head. Binoculars raised. The Panzer was perfectly positioned. Hull hidden. Only turret exposed. Elias keyed the radio. Sniper 2 to Baker 6. Possible armor threat, grid Delta 47. Commander visible. Vehicle hull down. Over. Response came quickly. Hold position. Will relay to armor. Maintain focus on infantry. Out. Minutes passed. The Shermans continued advancing. No course change. 0638 hours. Elias spotted a 2nd Panzer commander. 30 yards left of the 1st. His stomach tightened. 2 Panzers, he told Garrett. Garrett radioed again. More urgent. Same response. Information relayed. Continue observation. But the Shermans weren't stopping. 0642 hours. 3rd Panzer commander appeared. Jesus Christ, Garrett whispered. 3 of them. 3 Panzers. Overlapping fields of fire. Perfect ambush formation. 15 men in those Shermans, plus infantry caught in crossfire. Garrett reported again. Voice tight. 3 confirmed Panzers. Lead Sherman approaching kill zone. Information relayed. Continue mission. Out. Nothing changed below. The Shermans rolled forward. 300 yards from the intersection. 250. The German commanders were coordinating. Standing higher. Hand signals. Elias watched. Felt the weight of Brennan's orders. Do not engage armored vehicles. Court-martial for violation. 200 yards. 35 men had already died along this road. Now 15 more were rolling toward death. Unless... Elias looked at the tin cup. Muddy water catching morning sunlight through the broken window. 2 years of testing. Hundreds of hours. 7 canteens. Careful observation. Officers called it trick shooting, but those officers weren't here. Range to first commander, 820 yards. Eli, what are you? Wind negligible. Sun angle perfect. The orders were explicit. I know what the orders were. Elias positioned the cup carefully, angled it to catch morning sun. Through his scope, he kept the Panzer commander in view while adjusting the cup. The reflection caught, a flash of light, diffuse, scattered by mud particles, streaked across 800 yards. The German commander reacted, squinted, raised a hand to shade his eyes. He stood higher, upper torso exposed, trying to see where that light came from. Elias exhaled, the same way his father taught him 22 years ago. Crosshairs settled center mass. The Springfield was .30-06. At this range, 24 inches of drop. His finger tightened. In that instant, Elias Thornton crossed a line. He violated direct orders. He engaged armor when explicitly forbidden. He bet his career, possibly his freedom, on a technique developed in secret. A technique his instructors had dismissed. He bet everything on muddy water in a tin cup. And faith that his father had been right, that light could be advantage or enemy, and that understanding the difference could change everything. The Springfield cracked. The sound echoed across Norman countryside. Sharp, final, 820 yards away. The outcome hung suspended, between firing and impact, between orders followed and lives saved, between the soldier Elias had been trained to be and the warrior he was becoming. The bullet flew true, and history held its breath. 0652 hours. June 14th, 1944. The bullet took 3 seconds to travel 820 yards. Through the scope, Elias watched the German Panzer commander jerk, violent, sudden, then slump forward over the hatch rim, arms dangling. Target down. He worked the bolt, brass ejecting, fresh round chambering. Garrett grabbed the radio. Baker 6, Sniper 2, enemy armor confirmed Delta 47, commander neutralized, vehicle operational. 2 additional Panzers, same vicinity. Recommend immediate evasive action. This time the response was immediate. Sniper 2, Baker 6, Roger. All units halt advance, taking evasive positions now. 800 yards away, the lead Sherman reversed into cover. Infantry scattered to defensive positions. They're stopping, Garrett said. Eli, you just violated. I know. Elias was already repositioning the tin cup, angling toward the 2nd Panzer commander, who stood trying to understand what happened to his neighbor. The weapon revealed. What Elias had just used was brutally simple. A tin cup filled with muddy water. The suspended mud particles created diffuse reflection. When angled to catch sunlight, it produced a flash, bright enough to be visible at extreme range, scattered enough that pinpointing the source was nearly impossible. German commanders, already looking into the sun, saw these flashes. Unexpected, confusing, human nature took over. They tried to identify the source, stood higher, exposed themselves. Cost, $0. Preparation time, 30 seconds. Effectiveness, in 9 hours, it would kill 19 men and change Normandy. 0658 hours. Shot 2. The 2nd commander turned toward the light flash, squinted, stood higher. The Springfield cracked. Sometimes you have to choose between following orders and doing what's right, Elias said quietly. 800 yards. 2nd German officer down. 0712 hours. Shot 3. 3rd Panzer commander emerged cautiously, 900 yards distant, trying to coordinate response after 2 neighboring tanks went silent. Elias adjusted for increased range. 28 inches of bullet drop now. Mud reflection. Flash of light. The German reacted, stood, down. 3 commanders, Elias said, working the bolt. They'll adapt quickly. 0734 hours. Shot 4. A 4th Panzer maneuvered through narrow gaps. Commander necessarily exposed, directing his driver, moving erratically, wrong angle for reflection. This would be pure marksmanship. 750 yards, moving target. Elias tracked the rhythm, predictable pattern to the movements. There. The Springfield spoke. The German clutched his chest, pitched backward. The radio crackled. Different voice, higher authority. Sniper 2, this is Baker 6 actual. Continue engagement if possible. Tank destroyer support delayed minimum 30 minutes. You are saving lives. Repeat. Continue engagement. How copy? Elias and Garrett looked at each other. Baker 6 actual. Major Hendricks, battalion commander. Twist number 2. Implied permission.
Solid copy, Baker 6 actual, Garrett replied. Continuing engagement. What had begun as battlefield initiative was now sanctioned innovation. The Army was learning in real time that rules needed bending. 0800 through 1200 hours. The hunt. The Germans weren't blind. Radio intercepts told the story. Growing confusion. Tank commanders dying at unprecedented rates. But they couldn't identify the threat. Standard counter-sniper doctrine wasn't working, because Elias wasn't following standard patterns. He moved constantly, never more than 3 shots per position. The reflection techniques made source location impossible. The Germans were hunting a ghost. Over 4 hours, systematic destruction. Shots 5 through 8. Action sequence. 0823 hours. Panzer providing covering fire. Commander exposed 12 seconds. Reflection. Down. 0847 hours. Panzer reversing. Elias used Garrett's polished compass instead of the cup. Different reflection pattern. German confused. Down. 9:15 hours. 1,000 yards. Extreme range. Commander thought he was safe. He wasn't. Down. 9:54 hours. Forward observers were now calling in tank locations to Sniper 2, the local battle transforming. German armor could no longer operate freely. Shots 9 through 10. Horror sequence. By 1,000 hours, heavy fog rolled in. Visibility dropped below 200 yards. But Elias's elevated position gave advantage. German panzers in low ground were still visible at 500 yards through mist. 1,034 hours. Elias created reflection through fog. Light scattered ethereally. The German commander saw a glowing apparition. Stood, trying to understand. Fell silently. His crew never heard the shot. Never saw the shooter. Just watched their commander collapse. German radio intercept. 10:47 hours. Unknown American weapon engaging armor. Commanders dying from something we cannot identify. We see light flashes, then death. Morale deteriorating. Request air reconnaissance. We cannot fight what we cannot see. Obergefreiter Klaus Steiner wrote in his diary, 14 Juni. They have weapon using light. Our commanders dying one after another. Men calling it der Lichtgeist, the light ghost. Some think it's new American secret weapon. I think it's worse. A sniper who hunts us like animals. Klaus Steiner was 23. He'd be killed by artillery 3 days later. Never knowing he'd been right. Never knowing the weapon was muddy water in a cup. Twist number 3. German misinterpretation. Captured radio 1100 hours. Unknown American superweapon targeting commanders exclusively. Cannot be conventional sniper. Request immediate identification of weapon system. They thought it was directed energy, advanced technology. One battalion commander reportedly ordered, paint helmet visors with mud to protect from American light weapon. Defending against mud with mud. The irony was beautiful. 1,143 hours. Shot 12. The heist. Elias spotted German counter-sniper team. 720 yards. 2 professionals. Zeiss scopes. Eastern Front veterans probably. They understood the game. He watched 45 minutes, learning their pattern. Every 12 minutes they rotated positions. Textbook tactics. When the spotter scanned away, Elias fired. The shooter dropped. Zeiss scope shattered. The spotter began low crawling. Fast. Professional. Not fast enough. 15 seconds later, Elias fired again. German counter-sniper team eliminated.
Never got a single shot off. Those men were good, Eli, Garrett said. I know. You just beat them. Elias said nothing, just chambered another round. 12 down. 1,300 hours. Under fire. German artillery found the farmhouse. Systematic shelling of structures that could house snipers. Shells impacted. The building shook. Part of the roof collapsed. Time to move! They made it out 30 seconds before a direct hit obliterated the attic.
Southeast corner of Orchard, Elias said, running through hedgerow gaps. Good angle on eastern approaches. Third position that day, barely past noon, Orchard position, 1330 through 1600 hours, shots 13 through 16. From the Orchard, different perspective, new German positions visible. Shot 13, 1402 hours, Panzer withdrawing, commander coordinating multiple vehicles. Elias used tin cup from one angle, mirror shard from another. 2 simultaneous flashes. German couldn't process both. Down. Shot 14, 1438 hours. Narrow gap maneuver. Commander had no choice but exposure. Clean shooting. Down. But the Germans were adapting. Surviving commanders more cautious now. Shorter exposures. Unpredictable timing. Shot 15 took 23 minutes of waiting. Commander exposed himself 5 seconds. 1 chance. Down. Shot 16. 97 minutes of watching. Commander finally stood to stretch. Thought he was hidden by hedgerow. Was, from ground level. Not from Elias's tree position. 680 yards. Partial profile. Small window. Down. Garrett stared. That shot was impossible. Apparently not. Statistical perspective. Average World War II sniper. 0.3 kills per day over entire service. Elias Thornton on June 14th. 18.8 kills per day. Not twice as good. Not 5 times. 62 times better than average. Michael Jordan was approximately 5 times better than the average NBA player. Elias was 62 times better with a weapon improvised from garbage. The Germans would claim they faced advanced American technology. They couldn't accept the truth, defeated by mud and sunlight. Twist number 4. Cascade effect. By afternoon, German panzers operated fully buttoned up. Hatches closed. Severely limited visibility. American bazooka teams exploited this. 6 additional panzers destroyed that afternoon. Kills impossible if tanks operated normally. Elias's innovation created force multiplication. Every commander killed forced every other tank to operate suboptimally, creating opportunities for conventional weapons. 1 sniper impacting an entire sector's armored operations. 1600 through 1730 hours. Breaking point. Shots. 17, 18, 19. The tragedy. 7 hours of precision shooting. Physical toll mounting. Shoulder 1 massive bruise. Hands trembling from cold and sustained tension. Vision blurring at edges. At 16-12 hours, Elias aimed at a German soldier. As trigger squeezed, younger soldier, 18, maybe 19, walked into the path. The bullet struck the boy. Left shoulder. Terrible wound. Not immediately fatal. He fell screaming, calling for help in German. Through the scope, Elias watched. The original target ran to the wounded boy, exposed himself completely, cradling the younger man, screaming for medics. Clean shot, perfect target. Elias didn't fire, watched them carry the wounded boy away. Not like that, Elias whispered, hands shaking badly now. Not like that, Garrett nodded. There's rules even in this. Necessary didn't mean easy. Shot 18. 1,647 hours. German panzer attempting withdrawal. Commander directing complex maneuver. Had to expose himself. Elias's reflection from new position. Different angle than Germans expected. 680 yards. Down. 18 confirmed kills. 1 to go. Shot 19. 16-23 hours. 9 hours 31 minutes of fighting. 1 more panzer remained. 1 commander trying to coordinate German withdrawal. Trying to locate the American light weapon. Elias made final decision. All 3 reflective surfaces simultaneously. Tin cup left, compass center, glass shard right. 3 different flashes, creating impossible pattern that couldn't come from single source.
The Germans saw them all, stood fully upright, turning, trying to understand. 5 seconds of complete exposure. 400 yards, stationary target, no wind.
The Springfield cracked for the last time that afternoon. 16:25 hours. Aftermath. Remaining German armor withdrew. Radio traffic exploded. American units advancing. Objectives secured. Crossroads taken. Minor advance became significant breakthrough. Garrett reported to battalion. 19 confirmed. Sector secure. Elias sat against a tree, finally stopping. The tin cup beside him. Dried mud. Looked like trash. It had killed 19 men. Garrett brought K-rations and coffee. They'll want you teaching this to every sniper in the ETO. Elias stared at the cup. Just farm tricks. Farm tricks that saved 300 American lives today. 19 men are dead, Garrett. 19 enemy soldiers who would have killed hundreds of ours. They were following orders, same as us. That's what makes you different, Eli. You actually give a damn, even about the enemy. Footsteps approached through twilight. Captain Brennan. Long silence. Thornton. Pause. I don't know whether to court-martial you or recommend you for a Silver Star. Just doing what needed doing, sir.
Brennan picked up the tin cup. This stopped German armor? Diffuse reflection, sir. Drew their attention. They exposed themselves. Brennan studied it. Finally stood. Full report by tomorrow morning. Every detail. This could change how we fight. He turned to leave. Stopped. For the record, those orders about not engaging armor, consider them revised. Effective 06:52 hours today. Retroactive authorization. You're not getting court-martialed. You're getting that Silver Star. He walked away. Garrett and Elias sat as night fell over Normandy. Artillery rumbled, distant. The war continuing. But today, one man had changed everything. 19 shots, 19 kills, hundreds saved, because he'd trusted his judgment when doctrine failed. Because he understood the simplest solutions were often most effective.
Because a Nebraska farm boy learned that light could be advantage or enemy, and knowing the difference could change the world. Part 3. The Weight of Light. June 15th, 1944, 0800 hours. Division Headquarters. Elias Thornton stood in a room that smelled of cigarette smoke and mildew. Maps covered every wall. Officers crowded around a makeshift table. He'd expected a court-martial. What he got was something far stranger. Major General Harrison Ford, division commander, stood at the head of the table. Behind him, battalion intelligence officers, engineers, even a British liaison officer with a major's insignia. On the table between them, the tin cup, still crusted with dried mud. "Sergeant Thornton," the general said, not angry, curious. "You're not in trouble, you understand that." "Sir, I violated direct orders from Captain Brennan." "Captain Brennan's orders have been superseded, by me, retroactively." The general picked up the cup. Explain to me how this stopped 3 Panzer companies. So Elias explained. For 3 hours. He demonstrated the reflection technique using morning sunlight, showed how different mud consistencies created different reflection patterns, explained the physics, at least as much as a farm boy from Nebraska understood physics. Clay-heavy mud, brighter reflection, good for longer distances. Silty mud, softer glow, better for fog conditions. The angle of the sun, the position of the target, the way German commanders, already squinting into sunlight, couldn't resist investigating an unexpected light source. Human nature weaponized. The intelligence officers took notes, asked question after question. The British liaison, Major Charles Winterbourne, was particularly fascinated. "Remarkable elegance," he said in that clipped accent. "Reminds me of desert campaigns, Montgomery's deception operations, using the enemy's expectations against them. But this is simpler, more immediate. Works at the individual soldier level. Brilliant, really." Elias felt uncomfortable with the praise. "Sir, it's just..." "Just what, Sergeant?" "Farm tricks, using what's available." Winterbourne smiled. "The best innovations usually are.
Simple enough that anyone can use them, effective enough that everyone should. By 1100 hours, the meeting concluded. The general stood, extended his hand. "Sergeant Thornton, you've done something significant, more than you probably realize. Get some rest. We'll talk more soon." As Elias left, he heard the general speaking to his staff. "I want this documented, detailed technical bulletin, distributed to every sniper unit in the theater, immediately." June 17th, 1944, 72 hours after the engagement. The bulletin went out. Official title: Reflection Techniques for Anti-Armor Sniping Operations. Classified: Restricted. Distribution: all Allied sniper units, Normandy sector. The troops had a simpler name: the Thornton Method, or just Mudlight. Within 48 hours, improvised reflective devices began appearing throughout the front lines. Polished ration can lids, salvaged mirrors, purpose-built signaling equipment. Every sniper wanted to try it. Most failed initially. The technique was simple in concept, brutally difficult in execution, required understanding of light angles, target psychology, and perfect timing. But some succeeded. British sniper units in the eastern sector developed a variation using multiple reflectors coordinated by a single spotter, created confusing patterns that could disorient entire tank crews long enough for anti-tank teams to maneuver. Canadian snipers integrated the technique with aggressive infiltration tactics, using reflections to momentarily blind German tank optics during close-in bazooka attacks. Applications spread beyond anti-armor work. Same principles used to distract machine gun crews, artillery observers, infantry officers. One simple idea multiplying across an entire theater of war. Meanwhile, the German response. Intercepted radio traffic told the story. June 15th. American forces demonstrate new optical weapon system. Characteristics unknown. Recommend immediate investigation. June 17th. Losses among tank commanders approaching 20% in 48 hours. Suspect directed energy weapon. Request countermeasures. June 19th. All Panzer units. Commanders will operate exclusively through periscopes until further notice. Open hatch operations suspended. One battalion commander, never identified, reportedly ordered his entire unit to paint their helmet visors with mud to protect against the American light weapon. The irony was beautiful, trying to defend against mud with mud. It took German intelligence nearly 2 weeks to correctly identify what was happening. By then, dozens more tank commanders had been killed. Panzer tactical doctrine throughout Normandy had been fundamentally altered, all because they couldn't accept a simple truth. They were being defeated by innovation, not technology, by a farm boy with muddy water in a cup. But let's talk about what this cost. Not the strategic cost, the personal cost. Because while military historians would celebrate the Thornton method as brilliant innovation, Elias Thornton was living with something else. 19 faces. He saw them when he closed his eyes at night. Young faces mostly. German boys far from home, following orders, fighting for a cause most probably didn't fully understand. Elias knew the mathematics. His 19 kills had saved hundreds of American lives. Maybe thousands when you factored in subsequent adoption of his technique. The moral equation was clear, necessary. But necessary didn't mean easy. Garrett noticed it first. 3 days after the engagement, watching Elias clean his rifle with hands that wouldn't quite stop trembling. "You okay, Eli?" "Fine." That's not what I asked. Elias was quiet for a long moment. "I keep thinking about the young one. The one I shot by mistake. The kid who walked into the path. That wasn't your fault. Doesn't matter whose fault it was. He's still bleeding because of my bullet. He's enemy, Eli. They're all enemy. They're all somebody's son." Garrett had no response to that. July 1944. Elias returns to frontline duty. Garrett had been wounded on June 22nd. Mortar fire during a separate operation. Shrapnel to the leg. Not fatal, but enough to get him evacuated to England for recovery. Captain Brennan had been promoted to major in late June. The 28th Infantry Division was grinding forward through France, casualties mounting daily. Good officers were getting field promotions to fill gaps left by the dead. Brennan's tactical flexibility, his willingness to revise doctrine when battlefield reality demanded it, had been noticed by higher command. The man who'd almost court-martialed Elias was now using Elias's innovation as an example of why rigid adherence to procedure could be fatal. Elias got a new spotter, Private James Morrison, good kid, competent, but not Garrett. The war continued its brutal mathematics. Elias continued refining his techniques. The reflection method worked in some situations, not all. He adapted, learned when to use it and when to rely on conventional sniping. His confirmed kill count climbed, 30, 40, 50. By September 1944, when Allied forces reached the German border, Elias had 63 confirmed kills, 27 of them tank commanders or armored vehicle operators, numbers that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier, but each number had a face. Each kill was a human being who'd woken up that morning not knowing it was their last day alive. Elias carried them all. October 1944, Saint-Vith, Belgium. The awards came through. Bronze Star with V device for June 14th, downgraded because he'd technically violated orders, even though those orders were retroactively superseded. Citation: for exceptional initiative in developing field, expedient methods to counter enemy armor threats under combat conditions. Translation: we're glad you did it, but we can't officially endorse violating orders. The Silver Star came for actions near Saint-Vith in October. Different battle, same technique. German self-propelled guns threatening an American position. Elias used his reflection method to systematically eliminate the gun commanders, saved an entire company. This time the citation was explicit. Sergeant Thornton's innovative methods have become standard doctrine throughout Allied forces, saving countless lives. When they pinned the medal on his chest, Elias felt nothing but weight. Elias survived the Battle of the Bulge that winter, fought through the final push into Germany, was there when the war ended in May 1945, VE Day, victory in Europe. He felt relief, not joy, just relief that the killing had stopped. 63 confirmed kills, 27 tank commanders, hundreds, maybe thousands of lives saved through his innovations. And all he wanted was to go home and never think about it again. June 1945, Nebraska. The train pulled into Clinchco County on a Thursday afternoon. Elias stepped onto the platform wearing his uniform, Silver Star and Bronze Star ribbons on his chest. Clara Hartwell was waiting, the school teacher's daughter who'd written him letters every week for 3 years, who'd promised to wait, who'd kept that promise. They were married 3 weeks later. Small ceremony, family and close friends, no fuss. Elias used his GI Bill benefits to buy a small farm, 80 acres. Not much, but it was his. He worked it the way his father had taught him, dawn to dusk, quiet, methodical. Most of the time, he didn't talk about the war. Clara learned not to ask. Learned to recognize the nights when he'd wake up gasping, sweating, eyes wide in the darkness. Learned that on those nights, the best thing she could do was hold him and say nothing. The nightmares would continue for 26 years. 1952, 7 years after the war. The letter arrived in January. Official U.S. Army letterhead. Army Training Command was developing new sniper manuals for use in Korea. Would Sergeant Thornton, retired, be willing to consult? Travel to Washington? Clara watched him read the letter. You don't have to go. I know. But you're thinking about it? Elias was quiet for a long time. Finally, no, I'm not going. He wrote a polite response, declined the travel, but spent 3 days writing out detailed accounts of his techniques, emphasized improvisation, environmental awareness, flexibility over doctrine. Ended with, the ability to adapt is worth more than the best equipment. Teach soldiers to think, not just to follow procedures. Mailed it. Never heard back officially. But elements of his recommendations would appear in Army training manuals for the next 4 decades. 1958, 13 years after the war. The letter that arrived in March was different, handwritten, from Ohio, return address, Robert Davis, Cleveland. Elias almost didn't open it, figured it was a veteran looking for war stories. He didn't share war stories, but Clara encouraged him. What harm could it do? He opened it. Dear Mr. Thornton, you don't know me, but I commanded a Sherman tank in Baker Company, 28th Infantry Division, on June 14, 1944. I was told years later, at a reunion, that it was your shooting that prevented my tank from driving into a Panzer ambush that morning, that you violated orders to engage enemy armor, that you killed 3 Panzer commanders before they could kill us. My crew was 5 men, including me: Corporal Davis, Private Henderson, Private Martinez, Sergeant Collins, Private First Class O'Brien. All 5 of us came home. All 5 of us have lived good lives these past 14 years. Henderson runs a hardware store in Michigan, has 3 kids. Martinez teaches high school in Texas, coaches baseball. Collins owns a garage in Pennsylvania, just became a grandfather. O'Brien is a police officer in New York, married with 2 daughters. I manage a factory in Cleveland. My wife and I have 4 children. That's 84 years of living, Mr. Thornton. 84 years we wouldn't have had if you hadn't done what you did. Children who wouldn't exist, grandchildren who wouldn't be born, lives that wouldn't be lived. There's no medal that covers that kind of gift. I don't know if you think about June 14th, 1944. I don't know if you remember the men you saved, but I wanted you to know that we remember you. Thank you doesn't seem like enough, but it's all I have. Thank you for our lives. Respectfully, Robert Davis. Elias read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and placed it in a small wooden box he kept on his bedside table. Over the years, more letters would join it, dozens of them, from men who'd been in Baker Company, from men who'd learned the Thornton method and used it to survive other battles, from widows who wrote, "My husband came home because of you," from children who wrote, "I exist because of what you did." The box filled slowly. Elias never responded to the letters, didn't know what to say, but he kept every one, read them sometimes late at night when the nightmares came. They helped, a little. 1970s. The nightmares finally begin to fade, not disappear, never disappear completely, but fade. Clara later said it was like watching ice melt, gradual, almost imperceptible day to day. But over months and years, something changed. Elias started talking more, not about the killing, never about that, but about the men he'd served with. Garrett Walsh, who'd survived his wounds and become an engineer in Pennsylvania. Major Brennan, who'd made colonel by war's end. About the landscape of Normandy, the hedgerows, the way light looked different in France than in Nebraska. Small things, peripheral details, but talking nonetheless. In 1974, local schoolchildren asked him to speak for Veterans Day. He almost refused, but Clara encouraged him. Just tell them about the problem-solving, not the killing. So he did. Showed them a tin cup, explained how light reflection worked, how mud created diffusion, how understanding your environment could solve problems that seemed impossible. Never mentioned the 19 German soldiers, just talked about innovation, about using what you have, about thinking differently. The kids loved it. He started doing it annually. Small talks, always emphasizing the problem-solving, the creativity, the lesson that simple solutions often worked better than complex ones. Never the killing, always the thinking. March 15, 1989. Elias Thornton dies peacefully in his sleep. He was 69 years old, had lived 44 years after the war. Good years mostly, raised by Clara, served on the school board for 2 decades, built a life. The local Nebraska newspaper ran his obituary, 200 words, mentioned his military service, Bronze Star, Silver Star, brief description, served with distinction in World War II. More space devoted to his civilian life, his contributions to local farming community, his work with schools, the respect his neighbors had for him. The obituary described him as a man who could solve just about any problem with whatever he had at hand. True enough.
What the obituary couldn't mention because it was still relatively unknown, was the true extent of his military contribution. The way his innovation had changed tactical doctrine, the hundreds of lives saved, the legacy that continued long after he put down the rifle. That story wouldn't become public knowledge for another 4 years. 1993. Dr. Samuel Moyer publishes Innovative Infantry Tactics of World War II. Chapter 7 was devoted entirely to Elias Thornton. Moyer had spent 6 years researching declassified documents, interviews with surviving veterans, technical analysis, statistical modeling. His conclusions were startling. The Thornton method, in its various forms, had contributed to the neutralization of over 300 German armored vehicles throughout the European theater. Variations had been incorporated into special operations training for multiple NATO countries during the Cold War. The fundamental principle, using simple environmental elements to create tactical advantage, had influenced military thinking far beyond the specific anti-armor application. One farm boy from Nebraska had changed how modern militaries thought about innovation and improvisation. But more importantly, Moyer documented the personal cost. Through interviews with Clara Thornton and others, he revealed what Elias had never spoken about publicly: the nightmares that lasted until the 1970s. The burden of 19 faces, the way he'd carried those German soldiers, somebody's sons, he'd called them, for the rest of his life. The book portrayed Elias not as a triumphant hero, but as something more complex, more human, a man who'd done what was necessary, who'd saved hundreds of lives, and who'd paid a psychological price that lasted decades. That complexity resonated. The book became required reading at several military academies. 1997, 28th Infantry Division Veterans Reunion. Garrett Walsh, now 79 years old, attended. Hadn't seen most of these men in 50 years. During the banquet, someone mentioned Elias Thornton, the Mud Cup sniper, the Bocage miracle, the stories that had grown over the decades, some accurate, some embellished. Garrett listened quietly through dinner, then asked to speak. What he said would fundamentally change how people understood that day in June 1944. The revelation. Garrett stood at the podium, hands shaking slightly, not from age, from the weight of what he was about to reveal. "I need to tell you something about Elias Thornton," he began. "Something I never told anyone while he was alive, because he asked me not to." The room went quiet. Everyone thinks the Mud Cup was battlefield improvisation, spur-of-the-moment genius when we needed it most, and in a way it was, but not the way you think. He paused. Elias had been experimenting with reflection techniques since our training in England, 1943, long before Normandy, long before June 14th. Murmurs around the room. He'd get up an hour before the rest of us, every morning, in the pre-dawn darkness, testing different mud mixtures, different water ratios, different reflection angles. The officers told him to stop, called it trick shooting, told him it wasn't proper sniping. But Elias kept doing it anyway, quietly, before anyone else was awake. He filled 7 canteens with different mud consistencies, tested them in fog, in rain, in snow, in clear conditions, recorded which worked best in his notebook, refined the technique over months. By the time we landed in Normandy, he knew exactly which mud mixture created the ideal diffuse reflection, bright enough to catch attention from 800 yards, dispersed enough to hide its source. That tin cup wasn't grabbed at random on June 14th. He'd been carrying it since England, specifically for this purpose. Garrett's voice grew stronger. What Elias did that day wasn't improvisation. It was the application of months of systematic experimentation, scientific method, hypothesis, testing, refinement. While officers slept, Elias was conducting optical experiments in frozen foxholes, like a scientist in a laboratory, except his laboratory was a war zone, and his experiments would save hundreds of lives. That's not luck, that's not natural talent, that's dedication, determination, the refusal to accept
that inadequate equipment meant defeat. The room was absolutely silent now. Elias never wanted credit for the preparation. He'd say it was just farm tricks. But I was there. I watched him, night after night, testing, refining, preparing. And when the moment came, when doctrine failed and lives hung in the balance, he had a solution ready. Not because he was lucky, because he prepared for a situation he knew would eventually come. Garrett's voice softened. That's who Elias Thornton really was.
A man who saw problems coming and prepared solutions nobody asked for. Who worked when others slept. Who kept going when told to stop. And who never, ever took credit for how hard he'd worked. He sat down to complete silence. Then, slowly, applause began. Building, growing, until the entire room was standing. Not applauding the kills, not celebrating the war, applauding the man who'd cared enough to prepare, who'd worked hard enough to be ready, who'd been humble enough to never brag about it. 2004, Fort Benning, Georgia. The United States Army Sniper School dedicated a new training facility. Official name, the Elias Thornton Advanced Techniques Range. The facility included stations for teaching modern adaptations of his reflection methods. Using sophisticated materials now, laser pointers, electronic strobes, purpose-built optical equipment. But the fundamental principles remained the same. Use environment, manipulate light, control what enemy sees. The plaque at the facility entrance read, "Private First Class Elias Thornton reminds us that innovation often comes not from complex technology or elaborate systems, but from the creative application of simple elements available to any soldier with the vision to see beyond established doctrine." His legacy is not merely a technique, but an ethos of adaptability that remains vital to modern warfare. In a display case beside the plaque, an original tin cup, on loan from the U.S. Army Ordnance Museum, still crusted with dried mud from June 1944. Thousands of soldiers train on the Thornton Range every year. Most don't know the full story, don't know about the nightmares, the burden, the decades of carrying 19 faces. They know the innovation, the technique, the tactical brilliance. That's enough. Because Elias Thornton's legacy isn't about the killing, it's about the thinking. Let me tell you what this story really means. 19 Panzer commanders killed in a single day. Unprecedented, statistically impossible, and yet it happened. Hundreds of American lives saved, thousands when you account for subsequent applications. German armored doctrine fundamentally altered across an entire theater of war, all from muddy water in a tin cup. But here's what matters more. Elias Thornton was just a farm boy from Nebraska. No special training before the war, no advanced education, no privileged background. What he had was observation, patience, willingness to experiment when told not to, determination to find solutions when others accepted problems, and the moral courage to break rules when lives demanded it. That's not superhuman, that's human at its best. The ability to look at impossible situations and say, "I'll figure it out." That's what won World War II. Not just industrial capacity, not just numerical superiority. American soldiers at every level who refused to accept that inadequate equipment meant defeat, who improvised, who adapted, who overcame. Elias Thornton with his mud cup, thousands of others with their own innovations, small solutions to immediate problems, multiplied across millions of men, creating unstoppable momentum. But, and this is crucial, Elias never forgot the cost. 19 German soldiers, somebody's sons, following orders. He killed them because it was necessary. He carried them because he was human. That's what separates warriors from killers. Warriors understand both the necessity and the cost. They do what must be done, and they live with what they've done. Elias Thornton was a warrior, and America is grateful. Now, if this story moved you, I need you to do something. Hit that like button right now. Every like tells YouTube to share this with more people who need to understand that innovation comes from necessity. That determination beats preparation when you're creative enough to turn obstacles into advantages. Subscribe to this channel.
Turn on notifications.
We bring you stories like this every week. Forgotten innovations. Ordinary Americans solving extraordinary problems. The human side of history that textbooks ignore. Drop a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. Did anyone in your family serve in World War II? Do you know stories of battlefield innovation that were never written down? Stories that deserve to be preserved. Share them below. These stories matter. The men who lived them deserve to be honored. You're part of making that happen. To Staff Sergeant Elias Thornton, and every soldier who proved that American ingenuity knows no limits when lives are on the line. We remember. We honor your service. We tell your stories. Because some histories are too important to remain forgotten. Thank you for watching. Elias Thornton never wanted to be remembered as a killer. He wanted to be remembered, if at all, as a farmer, a neighbor, a man who helped local kids with their homework, who fixed broken equipment for free, who showed up when people needed help. But history remembers him differently now, as the man who proved that necessity breeds innovation, that simple solutions often work better than complex ones, that one person, in the right moment, with the right idea, can change everything. He carried 19 faces for 44 years, saw them in nightmares, carried their weight every day. But he saved hundreds of American lives and taught thousands of soldiers that the impossible is often just the improbable, waiting for someone brave enough to try. That's the real legacy of the Mud Cup sniper. Not the kills, not even the technique. The man who wielded it, the warrior who never stopped being human, the soldier who understood that necessary doesn't mean easy, and that doing what's right sometimes means breaking what's written. Elias Thornton, Nebraska farm boy, American warrior, forever remembered.